is for our heritage, our tradition, our future. Today, we become.
In this episode of Mutual and Federal Premier Interschools Rugby, we look ahead to this Saturday's derby between rivals Jeppe High School for boys and King Edward VII School, live on SuperSport. As far as schoolboy rugby rivalry goes, the Jeppe Cares match is as big as they come. A traditional derby in every sense of the word. These two great Johannesburg schools first met on the rugby field in 1935 and have played each other on an annual basis ever since.
Yeah, I think Jeppe, it is the sort of true measure of one another. The two bigger boys, traditional schools in Johannesburg against one another, the black and white versus the red. And I just think it's because of the wonderful rivalry and healthy rivalry that exists between the two schools that probably makes the fixture just that much more special.
125 years of tradition. So, and our boys are very much aware of representing all these gentlemen, representing 125 years of history. And our boys are pretty much aware of that as well.
It's always an honour to play against Cares. Jeppe, whenever Jeppe Cares play, Jeppe just goes into this atmosphere. It's such a great feeling and a great vibe.
It was a really big, traditional derby between King Edward and Jeppe, and my year lived up to all the expectations. It was a physical, it was a hard, tough game, and the crowds were there in their droves. So, yeah, it was great to experience stuff like that. It was great to experience schoolboy rugby, really living out the full enjoyment of this great game we call rugby.
Jeppe, the older of the two schools, was established in 1890 and has a proud sporting heritage, with Kes being their fiercest rivals on the field.
The King Edward's Jeppe is a long-standing rivalry. Two very good schools, and the boys are extremely proud of their schools. And I think from a schoolboy perspective and the old boys perspective, I think there's always going to be a lot of eyes on that game. Everyone's looking for a few bragging rights, whether it's around the restaurant, bar, or at the rugby on the day. But I remember fondly playing Jeppe. It didn't always come out on top. I think that's what makes it great, is that it's definitely not a one-sided clash every year. It's a lottery who's going to win.
I think the one thing that I learned when I was coaching at Jeppe was, for too many years, the King Edward's Jeppe game was the end-all and be-all of everything. And I think in times that you could have a disastrous season, and as long as you won that derby game, you had a good year.
It's obviously one of the older clashes in Johannesburg. They are our traditional rivals. They're a fantastic school, and we regard ourselves as a fantastic school. So it's special for us from an historical point of view, and of late, the rugby is very, very competitive.
That rivalry is there, and your year is made, as far as Jeppe is concerned, if you beat Kes.
Arguably, Jeppe's most prominent sporting old boy is Jake White, the man who led the Springboks to World Cup glory in 2007.
Oh, look, I had lots of memories when I was at school. I suppose making the friendships I did, playing sport, spending some time in the boarding house. I was at Cessabie, so, I spent a lot of time at the school. So, there are a lot of fond memories, a lot of mates that I'd met along the way, which I still see and stay in contact with. Yeah, and I suppose it's sometimes, just growing up to be a young boy in a boys' school, there's a lot of things you think about. I'm sure there's a couple I wouldn't put on TV, but it was a great institution to be part of as a young boy.
I think the biggest attribute is when you talk about Jake was his ability to mould youngsters into good rugby players and into a good team. And if you look back at it, maybe that is his strong point. That he's got that canning ability to work with the younger generation and mould them and guide them and getting them to believe in a dream.
I did know Jake. He was my phys ed teacher when I was in Standard 6. It was his last year at Jeppe, so I'm proud to say to all my friends that I was taught by Jake White. And he's definitely left a legacy for the school to live up to.
Yeah, look, I must say that the thing that drove me was the fact that I got a chance to coach at Jeppe. I never coached to become a Springbok coach. I coached because I enjoyed it.
Jake is an absolute legend, and he still has a lot of input into the way we think. We communicate with him, I won't say regularly, but quite often. And just his ideas, just his presence, and knowing that Jake is an old boy and that we've got his backing, obviously gives us a lot of confidence.
Although not a schoolboy star himself, Jake was honoured with the utmost sporting award at Jeppe.
The highlights were, I suppose, the fact that I represented the first team. I had no illusions of grandeur. I knew that, I had limitations, but the nice thing was the school, felt it important that after we won the World Cup in 2007, they presented me with honours blazer for rugby, which, it's amazing because I would never have got that as a schoolboy. I got that as a belated gesture, which I must say is obviously something I'm really proud of.
Jeppe's rivals on Saturday, Kes, boast a sporting record that few can match. Whilst Kes have a very impressive rugby record, it is in cricket that the Houghton School has excelled.
There's a lot of focus on our rugby here at King Edward, but I've always said if we're known for anything, it's really our cricket. We are a cricketing school. We've got a very proud history of cricketers, and I think we only have to look back in recent times to recognise familiar names like Graham Smith, Neil Mackenzie, particularly now Quinton de Kock. We're certainly very proud of our cricketers, like we are of all our sportsmen who come through the doors here at King Edward.
Yeah, I had an amazing period at Cares. Started at the prep school, KEPS. Finally convinced my dad, standard 2, standard 3, to send me across to KEPS. And from a sporting perspective, it was probably the best move I made. And many other perspectives, I guess, the education and the traditions and learning about the boys. But it took a while because my dad was a Jeppe boy and still gets a huge amount of stick today for allowing me to go to Cares.
It's been good to have Graham Smith back at the school recently, and in fact he donated the pair of boots he wore in his 100th test, the commemorative boots, and they sit and have a proud place in our museum.
In 2008, Graham Smith and Neil Mackenzie set the world record for the highest opening stand in Test cricket, putting on 415 against Bangladesh. However, the partnership between the two Cares boys started some years before.
I remember Neil Mackenzie was my rugby coach at one stage when we were in the third team. Sort of in my year of rugby, sort of moved between firsts and seconds, but the younger age played a bit of thirds, which was one of the more fun experiences on the rugby field that I had.
Talking to the boys, the Jeppe boys and Kes boys will always support one another on the outside. Fierce rivalry, good friends afterwards.
As it unfolded going forward, there were two Springboks, and both of them were picked, while I was the coach, Joe Fanikak and Brian Abana, and I know they've now got Scurry and Tambeni, who's obviously also an old King Edward's boy, but at that time, the irony for me was that the two King Edward's boys who became Springboks got picked by a Jeppe boy, and I suppose that also doesn't go down too well with all the King Edward's boys.
Sibusiso Nkosi, we've seen what a good runner he is. Strong, refusing to go down to ground.
Sibusiso Nkosi is one of 4 Jeppe boys in the Lions Craven Week team, and he will be a key man heading into the Kes encounter.
Of course, they've got a massive clash in a few weeks' time against Kes.
Jeppe Kes, that's one of the traditional big derbies of South African schoolboy rugby.
Since I got here, it's been a very wonderful experience. It's a totally different atmosphere at the traditional boys' school with a lot of traditions going around and a lot of pride in the boys. And I'm proud to be a first-team player out of 1,000 boys. Seeing that the Jeppe first team is honored by all the boys, it's loved by all the boys. When you walk around the school, you feel like a different person. It's sort of like you're an angel amongst demons, if I can say so. You stand out very much when you play for the Jeppe first team, and the pride we carry onto the field really makes me humbled.
For both schools, the Kes Jeppe derby is so much more than just a game.
I think the thing that I enjoyed, and you still remember the war cries and the anthems and the boys singing on the day, and it's great to see that that's just got stronger and stronger. I was at King Edward's the other day doing some stuff, and to see the new little takes on things and the new traditions and the new camaraderie's growing.
Usually the night before a game, we have the tradition of putting our jersey under the pillow so that you can feel the crest close to us, and then you wake up and you got red in your heart.
It's a the biggest game of the season, actually. Like, when I train during preseason, the red versus the black and the white is all I can think of, and all the other matches are just like a build-up to the Kes clash.
Kes and Jeppe have met 82 times at first 15 level, with Kes winning 55 and Jeppe 22, along with the 5 draws. However, Jeppe have held the upper hand in recent times, winning 3 of the last 4 encounters between these schools.
Just shows you again, you know, how intense those games were.
We walked all the way from Jeppe to King Edwards as boarders and went to watch the game, and we got
thumped. So that sticks out in my mind. And then, you know, the times that I was back there as a master, we won it.
Turn of the decade, a Kes side featuring Skaro and Zubeni put in a brutal performance to thump Jeppe 65-10. The following year, in 2010, Jeppe managed to turn the tables and grab their first win over their rivals since 2002, the year after Brian Abana matriculated.
I remember my first team game against Jeppe in my matric year. It was my first ever televised game. And I'll never forget, it was at Jeppe. Seeing the 10 to 12,000 fans, lined up around the Jeppe fields was pretty awesome.
Last year's derby was scheduled to be played on April the 20th as part of the Mutual and Federal Premier Interschool Series. However, heavy rains forced the match to be postponed to the 11th of May.
By the time the second game came, obviously boys motivated all over again and understanding that it's almost like a second bite at the cherry. And and we ended up victorious in the game, but it was a really, really close game. Normally typical of a Kes Jeppe derby, it was a classic encounter.
It was the first time that we beat Kes 3 times in a row, so that was a very special win. And coming again because I scored the winning try.
For us, I think it's quite a big thing. Having lost a few of the games before, I think we'd like to be the team that beats Jeppe.
Come Saturday, only 70 minutes of intense action will determine whether Johannesburg is painted in the red of Kes or the black and white of Jeppe.
You know, it will be 2 schools that have enormous tradition, 2 schools that are both over 100 years old, playing for the honour of their school.
Today, we stand for all that is, for our heritage, our tradition, our future. Today, we become.
Watch Jeppe versus Kes in Mutual and Federal Premier Interschools Rugby this Saturday, live on SuperSport.